Hello and welcome back to our NHS Pensions podcast series, where we take each topic of the NHS pension scheme and break it down for you to help you manage your pension, plan for the future and understand the scheme. I'm joined by two members of the NHS pension team here. I've got Mal and Angie. Today we're going to be discussing partial retirement. And partial retirement is just one of many retirement options that members may choose to take. And we're going to learn more about how that works. So let's kick things off. I'm going to go in with the main question here. Can I have an overview of what partial retirement is?
Absolutely. So partial retirement is the process by which you access a proportion or all of your pension benefits that you've accrued to date, but that date could be in advance of the full retirement, and you can continue working with the NHS thereafter and continue to build further benefits in the scheme.
When you say a portion, do we mean a percentage? Is there a minimum? Is there a maximum?
So you can actually access between 20 and 100% of the pension benefits that you've accrued to date.
Okay, next question then. If you can access 100% of your benefits through partial retirement, what's the difference between taking partial retirement and then just taking normal retirement?
Okay, so when taking partial retirement, this is a fixed process. Obviously, you would have to agree it with your employer. But essentially, there's a fluid move from the employment beforehand to the one afterwards, where you're just taking some of that pension. You would have to reduce your commitment or your paid salary by a minimum of 10%. However, when you retire, that's you leaving the scheme and in something different called retire and return. We get a bit of confusion between the two sometimes. When you take that option, you take all of your retirement benefits, and then you have to have a gap in service of a minimum of 24 hours. Now, the difference is that when you do that, you could actually lose some of the benefits that you've accrued to date. Could be the amount of holiday that you get. Not all employers would take you back to square one with that. But with partial retirement, it's just a much more fluid process.
Okay, so in that explanation, you said that with partial retirement, it was more fluid. There was no break in service. But with retire and return, you do have to leave employment, don't you? You have to end your contract. You're having that break of service. So with partial retirement, you can dip into your pension, so to say, take a percentage, continue at work. Next question is then, you mentioned a 10% reduction in pensionable pay or a 10% commitment. Do you need your employer's permission to do this?
Absolutely. So the fact is that taking partial retirement and that 10% reduction, which is done through a variety of ways, but can be through a reduction in hours or dropping a band or moving into a different role, that's going to impact your employer. So you need them to agree to something that works out for you or for them, but they do have the option to say no to that.
You just said before about that 10% reduction could be reached by dropping a band. But that might be more than 10%. So can it be more than 10%? If somebody really wanted to step down to maybe a less stressful role, would it be okay if that then reduced their pensionable pay or their commitment by more than 10%?
You can do that, yeah, absolutely. But you do have to get that agreement from your employer because it can affect their business output.
So 10% is the minimum, but it can be more.
Absolutely.
And you absolutely need your employer's permission to do this.
100%, yeah.
Could your employer say no?
It's within their right to. You're on a contract to deliver a service or an output to that employer, and you're effectively changing what you're contributing to that employer's output. So they have the absolute right to say no. But that's why a discussion with them, there are a number of different ways that you can achieve this. So having that discussion early on would help with your employer.
I'd like to go back to the key differences between partial retirement and retire in return. If you could bullet point it for the members of the pension scheme, what are the differences? Why would they do one and not the other? Can we talk about that sort of thing? Are there really key reasons you see from members as to why they would take partial retirement and not retire and return, all the other way around? Because I think that's going to be the main topic for them watching this podcast today.
So the flexibility of partial retirement would be something that I'd start on. So how much of your retirement benefits you've got to date, you can take between 20 and 100% of that. So there's flexibility there. As you pointed out, there's also flexibility in how much you reduce your work by, and there is no break in service. You theoretically could carry on under the same terms and conditions, less for a reduction in hours or dropping a band, as we discussed. Whereas retire and return, it is a fixed procedure. So you do leave the service. It has to be a minimum of 24-hour break in employment, could be longer. And there's a bit more, not uncertainty, but you're not under, your employer is not under an obligation to continue the same terms of service that you were on before. Is there anything that you think I've missed?
I don't think so, no. Like I say, that is the big selling point for partial retirement from what we're seeing from our members, is that continuity of their service that they have in NHS employment, because they don't have to break that NHS employment. They have to have a change in the terms and conditions to achieve that at least 10% reduction in pensionable pay commitment. But it's about flexibility. It's why this was brought in as an option for members to give them more flexibility with their retirement.
I think that's the word, isn't it? It's much more flexible to do partial retirement, for what you said.
Yes.
Next question I'm thinking, and if I'm thinking it, I think the members will be thinking it. Can you do this more than once if you don't take 100%? If you wanted to take 20%, and then a year or two down the line, you wanted to take another percentage, could you do that?
Absolutely. So you can do it twice before you have to fully retire. So you can have 2 steps and then a full retirement, which can sort of allow you to have a sort of gradual entry into retirement and maybe not take the financial hit you may experience going from full-time employment into full retirement. You can just gradually enter full-time retirement over 2 partial retirements and then subsequent full retirement.
Okay, so coming back to the 10% reduction, or at least 10% reduction, we should say, how long is that for? Is this a permanent reduction to somebody's pensionable pay or somebody's commitment?
No, it's at least 10%, for at least 12 months from the date that you partially retire. But if at some point within that 12 months you decide you want to leave the NHS pension scheme or leave NHS employment, you do obviously still have that option. You don't have to stay in your pensionable role for another 12 months following your partial retirement. But we'd expect, if you do, that pensionable pay or the 10% reduction to last at least 12 months. And the onus to make sure that you remain below that 10% reduction is on the member themselves, to make sure that they're not taking on any additional, they're not taking a promotion within that 12-month period that's going to take them out of that at least 10% reduction. The onus is on the member to be monitoring that, because if they do exceed that, there is a possibility that their pension would be something called abated, which basically stops until they were back under that 10% reduction again.
One of the questions that we get quite a lot is whether the yearly pay rise can affect 10%. Yeah, so that isn't a factor. It's a 10% reduction in what you committed to, and the fact that you're getting an overall pay increase, it won't affect the calculation, as long as you can show that from the date that you took out the partial retirement that you have to take that 10% reduction at that point.
Okay, so I might be jumping the gun here a little bit, but if somebody did partially retire once, or they did twice if they took different percentages, and then they were ready to fully retire, is it the same process as it normally would be for somebody that hadn't taken partial retirement?
It's different. Once you go for your full retirement, so you've taken partial retirement twice and you're ready to fully retire, and you would have to do the full retirement process, which is the same application form as it is for partial retirement, which is the AW84, but you would be fully having a full 24-hour break. Your contracted employment, all NHS employment would cease. So those are the main differences. Once you've done it twice and you come to full retirement, very similar process, but then you'd be claiming what pension benefits you hadn't already claimed through partial retirement in full, and then having your full 24-hour break at least at the end of it.
So is it fair to say then that partial retirement is there for members to be able to access their benefits in a much more flexible way than retire and return?
Yeah, it gives people the option, so they don't have to claim their benefits in full. They can do whatever works for them between the 20 and 100%. So they have that option to claim it. And with every section of the scheme having a different retirement age, it gives people the opportunity to be more flexible, work out what's best for them as they head towards their full retirement.
Can I ask what happens to the percentage they didn't take? So if they did choose to just take 20% or 30, or 60, what would happen to the other bit of their pension that they hadn't taken?
So they can claim that at normal retirement age for that section or scheme, or If they get to, for example, if they have a 1995 scheme membership and they get to age 60, they can claim that, but they don't have to then claim the 2015 scheme until they reach state pension age if they don't want to. They could claim at age 60 and take the reduction on it, but there are options available if they wanted to leave that as in the scheme until they reach state pension age, or if they're doing a full retire and return, they could return and continue paying into the 2015 scheme. So, as you said, it gives people more flexibility.
So there are lots of options. Ultimately, nothing is happening to the bit they haven't taken. It's just still there, ready and waiting for them. And they can pick it up when they do their normal retire and return, or if they opted to do partial retirement for a second time if they haven't already.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Ange. That's lovely. We've talked a lot about partial retirement and the percentages that might be available to somebody. But how do they know what that relates to in terms of their pension and what they would be receiving? Is there a way for them to get a personal estimate to them that shows, depending on the percentage they wanted, this is what it would mean to them in the actual pension being paid to them?
Yeah, sure. There's a partial retirement calculator available on the website within the member hub of the NHS Pensions website. However, if the member was unable to use the calculator, there is a specific partial retirement estimate request form that they can complete and send to us, and we will provide them with an estimate of their partial retirement. Whatever percentage they've requested would give them within the NHS pension scheme in their benefits.
Where can they find that form that you mentioned?
It's within the member hub, within the partial retirement section of the NHS pension website.
Is there anything a member would need if they were using the calculator themselves? Would it be helpful if they had their pension details, their pension number, for example, their member number?
It would probably be helpful to have their membership number, and if they had access to their latest annual benefit statement, or their total reward statement, as they may call it, they could use the information that they find in that use the partial retirement calculator themselves to model different amounts and dates that they may want to take their benefits from.
Great. So there are those provisions in place to allow members to do this financial planning, if you will, to look into partial retirement.
There is, yes.
If somebody's wanting to take partial retirement, they've had that conversation with their employer, they've reached all of the criteria, they've got their estimate, and they're happy to go ahead. What are the next steps for them to proceed?
So they would fill in the normal retirement application form, which every member would complete if they were claiming pension benefits, which is the AWA form for active members. But with partial retirement, we also require some extra information. So there's a supplementary form that must be completed by both the member and the employer. So the employer confirms things like there's been a 10% reduction, at least a 10% reduction, in pensionable pay, or a 10% reduction in commitment if they're a practitioner, so a GP or a dentist. They'll confirm that they've been made aware of all the other information that is available for them for partial retirement, the calculator, and then they will sign that off. If we don't have both the supplementary form and the AWA signed and completed by the member and the pensions officer, we cannot process the application.
Just wanted to touch on something that you mentioned. You said before about the application form being for active members, and partial retirement is only available for active members, isn't it?
It is, yeah. You have to be actively contributing to the scheme at the point that you apply for partial retirement in order to be eligible to claim partial retirement.
Something I wanted to discuss about partial retirement was, how would members who have been affected by the McCloud judgement, how would that come into play for their pension? Is there anything they need to know? Is there anything they need to do?
So there is the option for members that are claiming partial retirement that are also affected by McCloud to ring fence all of their pension benefits up to the 31st of March 2015. And there is a safe benefits percentage calculator available on our website that will show them how they can do that, so that they make sure that they're only claiming a safe percentage that won't be impacted by their McCloud decision in the future.
And is there a place they can find out more information? Is it on the website?
There is a full section available on the website now, on the NHS Pensions website, about information about the changes to public sector pension schemes. That's where you'll find all of the latest information about the McCloud programme and how we're delivering that for our members.
Lovely, thank you. That brings us to the end of today's episode, all about partial retirement. If you head over to the NHS Pensions website and look under the Member Hub, you'll find all the information we've talked about today. If you've got any feedback on the topics you've heard today, or any suggestions about future topics you want us to do an episode on, please send us an email to the Stakeholder Engagement team. And finally, just hit subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcasts for any future episodes of the NHS Pensions podcast. That's all we've got time for today. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.